Welcome to this podcast. In this episode, we're going to be looking at calculating descriptive statistics for group data. We're going to start off with a simple table format here where we have the data X followed by the frequencies, which we'll label F. And then I've also included a couple of extra columns that we're going to use to describe several measurements as we go through this. Let's start off with this first column, which is the cumulative frequency column. Cumulative frequency is a running total of the frequencies you've counted thus far. So at this point we have 2 from here, and then as you look at it, the next row we're going to have 6, and all I'm doing here is I'm taking 2 plus 4 is now 6, 6 plus 9 is now 15, 15 and 8 make 23, and so on. Now you know you've correctly filled in the cumulative frequency column if this last value that you have here is equal to the sum of the frequencies. So let's just go ahead and add up the frequencies. Remember, sigma, the E here, means sum. So we're going to sum the frequencies or sum that column. So just looking at this, 2 and 4 is 6. Go all the way down, it's going to be a total of 36. If we move over to the next column, this is the X times F column. And these last two columns are going to make it easier on us here in a second to calculate using some formulas for the mean and standard deviation. So we're going to go ahead and fill these in now. But X times F is just the first column times the second column. So we'll get 10 here, 24, 63, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 10 is 90, and then finally 3 times 10 is 30. Finally, this last column, you have to square the first column and then multiply by F. So just as a small example here, 5 squared times 2 gives us 50. 6 squared times 4 is 144. And so on. So next up is 441, and 512, 810, and finally 300 for the last one. We'll also need to sum these columns as well. So the sum of the XF column, let's see, if we add all these values up, we should get 281. Go ahead and check this on your own just to make sure that everything's right, but it's 281 for that column. Finally, this last column is the sum of the X squared F column, which adds to 2257. So this is always the first step that you should take when you're trying to do a group data problem. Is if the problem just gives you the columns X and F, you should go ahead and add on these next 3 columns. Particularly the last 2 columns are going to be used to find standard deviation and mean. So let's look at the formulas that we're going to employ. First is the formula for the mean of a grouped data set. As you might have seen in your book, this is the particular formula. Sometimes it'll be written like so, where n, remember, n for all the statistics formulas is the number of data points. That's the same as the sum of the frequency column. So looking at our table, the sum of the XF is 281, and the number of data points is the sum of F, which is 36. Dividing those two, we'll get 7.8, and I'll round it here to 7.81. So that would be the grouped mean for this data set. Now notice, if we're going to calculate a mean, it better be somewhere between 5 and 10. And so the value of 7.81 makes sense here. Alright, next thing I want to try and calculate is the median. And remember with the median can be found at the n plus first divided by 2 position. Now this is not a formula to find the median, but it's a formula to find where it lies within the data set. So n in this case is 36, and so 36 plus 1 is 37 divided by 2. Let's see here, that's going to be in the 18.5 position. Remember from in class we said this means it's between numbers 18 and 19 in the data set. So as I go through the data set and I start counting, this is where the cumulative frequency column comes into play. Because after I've counted the first class, which is the set of 5s, I'm at 2, then I'm at 6, After I've counted all the 7s, I'm at 15. And I'm looking for the 18th and the 19th data point. So as soon as I start counting the data set involving 8s, I count number 16, number 17, number 18, and number 19, all the way up to number 23. But all we really care about is that numbers 18 and 19 occurred within that class, and so the median here is actually going to be 8. Well, simple enough. The last thing we want to look at is standard deviation, and we use the grouped variance to start us off with here, and this is usually how I've expressed it in class. But the group variance formula is this big formula. Given to us here by, we've got, well, there's a couple different ways to look at this. The way that we've done it in class is 1 over n minus 1 times, you have the sum of the x squared f's minus the sum of the xf's squared over n. Remember, this n minus 1 is kind of funny. You would expect to divide it by n because we're sort of taking an average here, but that's not in fact what we do. Remember, this is n minus 1 here. So looking at everything we have so far, since n is 36, this will be 1 over 35 on the outside. So it's 36 minus 1 would go in there. The sum of the x squared f's is right here. That's 2257. The sum of the xf squareds would be the number 281 squared. And n, once again, is 36. So if we calculate all that, throw it into our calculator, you get the value 1. Alright, if you calculate all that, you get the value 1.818. Now remember, this is the variance. What we really want is the standard deviation, and so the standard deviation here, which is Sx, is the square root of the variance, which is the square root of this number. And if you calculate that, you should get around 1.35. So that is the standard deviation of the data set. The important thing here is that when working with group data, you should remember to create these last 3 columns. Obviously, you're going to want to remember the formulas. I know in the quiz in class, I'm going to give you the standard deviation formula, but come test time, you're going to need to know how to work that formula out. Also, the median involving the cumulative frequency, as well as the median, as well as the standard deviation there at the end. It's really important that you're able to keep these 3 different methods separated from each other and come up with the appropriate answers for each. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.